This meeting is being recorded.
I have weak signal, so I'm going to probably lose you guys. That's why I just want to get in there and say hi to Stephen, sweetheart.
Hi, Craig.
Leave. How you doing?
Grand. Everything's grand. We're doing well.
I'd just like to open the meeting. Hi, everybody. This is Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement, and we have special guests tonight. We have Carlos Alfaro Leon from Nueva Radio Ya and Stephen Sefton from Tortilla Consol, and we hear Stephen's parrots in the background.
See that? I can just turn it off.
Okay, so welcome everyone. We have some special guests. And then also,
friends of ours.
Craig Passagiardula, video journalist, and Jeremy Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action Magazine, and they're working on a special show called Left on Left. And Pasta also has another show, which is Pasta to Go, The Convo Couch, and I think I got everything. Jeremy has some new books that just came out. Oh, we have John Perry. Great. And
I want to watch the news hour.
You go ahead. I got headphones. So
Okay. And you won't hear me. Such an animal.
welcome, John Perry and Chuck. And okay, so we're recording right now. And we're going to begin this kind of a bit of a presentation. So we're going to spotlight Stephen and Carlos, and then we'll go to panel and people will be able to ask questions and kind of learn about what happened, and also just learn about how public radio is done. So I would do a spotlight on Stephen and Carlos. How do we do that? Okay. Add a spot. There we go. Oh, thank you. All right.
All right.
And I'll just ask everyone who's not speaking to mute.
We'll see you next. Oil.
So, Gloria, I suggest that we ask Carlos to give a brief summary of what Nueva Radio Ya is, and why it was so important to the opposition in 2018 to attack it. Is that okay with you, Carlos?
Yeah, it's okay.
We want to take maybe we want to take one or two steps back from people who really are not familiar with what has been going on in Nicaragua. In 2018, there was a coup attempt that was sponsored by the United States, and criminals were basically burning down public structures. They were killing policemen. They were doing all kinds, burning hospitals, schools, all kinds of terrible things, building these barricades in the middle of the road where cars couldn't get through. Women were being assaulted and raped. Men were being beaten up and killed. It was very, very bloody. It was a very, very difficult period. And that's kind of the back setting for this 2018 thing. And within that, there was a real need for the American government to stop any alternate journalism and to control a message that all of a sudden, one of the greatest men of peace, President Daniel Ortega, all of a sudden became a dictator overnight, literally. And that, they were just murdering students at random. And, I kind of got involved in this, and I'll just talk a little bit about me. I kind of got involved with this because I was doing a lot of research in Nicaragua, and I had just come back from Nicaragua and when this happened. And I was horrified that they were showing photos and saying that these were peaceful student protesters, and they had grenade launchers on their shoulders, and they had rifles and guns and Molotov cocktails, and it was extremely violent. But the press was giving this image that had absolutely nothing to do with reality. And the big issue here is that the press is very important because it gives the messages out that they don't want us to have. So within that context, if what Carlos is saying is the truth, they don't want that. The United States government doesn't want that. It only wants, you know, radio or television or, you know, paper or internet or YouTube or Facebook. I remember Facebook was really crazy at that time. They want to control all of these messages and have the same message. So they wanted to really drown out Radio Ya and you know, the free press. So that's just the backdrop to just set it up for our audience who may not be familiar with, you know, what's going on. And then I just want to say a few words, and Stephen can jump right in. You know, I mean, my experience in Nicaragua is it's got free healthcare. This is a developing country. It's got free healthcare. It did very well with the COVID crisis because it had a multi-pronged approach to dealing with it. It gives land to people. It gives them titles to land. It gives microloans. It builds housing. It builds all kinds of schools. Education is free. And what else, Stephen? Jump in. There's a lot of small farmers. I think small farmers produce something like 90% of the food that's there. So there's not a lot of importing of critical food sources. So it's really, I think, an amazing country and really an example for what the United States could be, especially as a wealthy country, if it was people-centered and not corporate-centered and not profit-centered.
Yeah, I think that's the fundamental thing, Gloria. And I like to draw a distinction between what Western politicians and media call Western democracy and what is genuine democratization, which is what we have in Nicaragua. And Nueva Radio Ya is part of that. Carlos, perhaps you could give us a rundown of, give us a profile of Nueva Radio Ya and how it reaches out across the country, not just covering Managua.
Thank you very much, Stephen, Gloria, and all the present in this chat room. As I say before, I'm learning the language, so I want you to be patient with the way I pronounce or I say my ideas right now. La Nueva Radio Ya is the most popular radio station in Nicaragua. There are a lot of poor people who they're begging, they're asking for help, you know, for food. Maybe they need they need to go to a hospital, and in the hospital they need some medicine. La Nueva Radio Ya always helped them to all the people. 20 years ago, the Sandinista government was not in the government, but there was the other part. I mean, the opposite part. They were in the government. So in that moment, people in Nicaragua was totally poor. They didn't have nothing to subside, and La Nueva Radio always helped them. In 2018, when everything starts, you know, April 18, the plan of the criminals was to shoot down La Nueva Radio Ya because they knew that most of the people was listening to the radio, and what they wanted, the criminals, was to shoot down La Nueva Radio Ya so that they can do whatever they want. They start burning the radio station, and I was inside the building. So nobody can tell me nothing because I was inside. And my family in my house, they were crying, looking the TV station. The TV station began to broadcast when the criminals was burning La Nueva Radio Ya. So my wife called me, my kids were crying. Friends always call me, and they were telling me, "Where are you?" And I told them, "I'm inside of the Nueva Radio Ya. Are you good?" I always told them, "Yes, I'm good." But the real thing is that all of the people that we were inside we were not good because, we felt the heat. We felt that everything was so dangerous. But, it was very dramatically, with the family was crying, with the friends were worried about what's going to happen with all the people that we were inside. And that's an experience that we don't want to repeat no more in our life. So that's the beginning of this story. And after, I remember I had a friend, and he always said, the most sorry thing about all this environment is that the truth was almost killed in Nicaragua, because the criminals, Gloria just said it, the criminal went to say a lot of lies in Facebook, in the social medias, in the TV channels, and other radio that were opposite to the government. They began to say lies. And, there is something that people believe more in bad things than in good things. And I don't believe it. One of the things that I was so impressed is, for example, there are a lot of poor people who always went to the Radio Ya looking for help, and we were always giving that to the people. And in the 2018, some of those people who always appears in the radio begging for help, they were trying to burn us. So I told the director of the Radio Ya, Dennis Schwartz, it's incredible, Dennis Schwartz, because you helped them, and now they are trying to kill us. And Dennis Schwartz said, there are some people that they act that way. But I believe that good things always prevails. And right now, Nicaragua is living a very peace moment. And everybody, Gloria said it a few minutes ago, everybody is feeling good in Nicaragua, where kids are growing safely. There's a sport. There's always attention for the most needed people, and that's the true Nicaragua right now.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. And perhaps we could backtrack a little, and look again at the origins of the events of 2018, because in Gloria's summary, she explained that the whole series of events leading up to the actual failed coup attempt that began on April the 18th were orchestrated very clearly by the United States government. In fact, there was even one article right at the beginning of the events that actually boasted how they'd set about organizing what they called an insurrection. I've forgotten which US outlet that appeared in. But it was all very clear. And Laura Dogu, who was the ambassador at the time, the US ambassador at the time, she's now engaged in a similar efforts to destabilize, and has been for a while, engaged in similar efforts to destabilize the government of Xiomara Castro in Honduras. So, and what happened prior to 2018 is really quite interesting, because all through the period from 2007 up to 2018, the government had built a very strong consensus between practically all sectors of Nicaraguan society about the human development plan that they were implementing in Nicaragua that was benefiting everybody. And what happened, and this is my take on it, what seems to have happened is that the US government started putting pressure on the right-wing sectors in Nicaragua, for example, threatening businessmen with perhaps having their assets sequestered in the United States. At the same time, in the Catholic Church, the Cardinal Obando y Bravo, who had been a key figure in maintaining stability in Nicaragua from 2007 up to 2018, had begun to get very old unable to wield the influence that he had previously. And that gave space within the Catholic Church for extremely right-wing bishops to take over. And they, in effect, what happened was that the United States government gave up on traditional electoral politics because it was very clear that the Sandinista government was electorally impregnable. They were not going to get defeated in elections. And so the United States authorities bet all their money on a combination of opposition NGOs, a right-wing business sector, and the right-wing sectors of the Catholic Church. And they put together that coalition to destabilize the government. And they were very methodical. And as Carlos said, they made expert use of the psychological warfare opportunities that are available, thanks now to the incredible technology of the social networks. And they used that extremely effectively to create a kind of shock effect in April. And as Carlos said, many people were taken in by that because of the very clever psychological techniques that we used, very innovative use of social media like Facebook, Twitter, and so on. And it took about a month to 6 weeks before most people started to realize that everything that they'd been told about the student massacre, that was a lie. And the big lie that's still repeated sometimes in international media is that there was a student massacre, that somehow right-wing business people wanted to defend the rights of pensioners and workers, and that's why they walked away from the social security negotiations with the government. And people were led to believe that, and even were foolish enough to believe that ridiculous tale that right-wing business sectors could care less about pensioners and working people, and there was one lie after another, as Carlos pointed out. And the reason for the attack on Nueva Radio Ya, which is extremely violent and involved actually a couple of days prior to the attack, Carlos probably remembers this better than I do, there was an attack against police officers on the road leading up to the Central American University, in which I think 2 police officers were killed by opposition gunmen. And then on the day of the attack against Nueva Radio Ya, 4 police officers suffered gunshot wounds as they tried to clear a path for the firefighting services that were trying to reach Nueva Radio Ya. And Carlos he pointed out to us that it wasn't just him that was inside the radio. There were a total of 22 radio workers inside the radio when it was being attacked by a gang of dozens and dozens of well-armed, very well-organized thugs, opposition thugs, who were backed up by armed individuals who were able to fend off the police and the firefighters to stop them from getting to Nueva Radio Ya to put out the fire. It was a miracle that Carlos and his colleagues managed to escape because they were literally besieged, and they were trapped between the main road at the front of the radio station, and at the back of the radio station there was a very narrow road that leads out to one of the universities. And Carlos, perhaps you could explain to us how did you manage to get out of the building when it was on fire, when you were surrounded by people, many of whom had Molotov cocktails and weapons of different kinds, including firearms.
And machetes.
Machetes, Molotov cocktails, bullets everywhere. And what I believe, this is what I believe, it was God to help us to get us out of the radio station in that moment. we cannot breathe, all the fire inside the building. We tried to go out. There were people with machetes, with Molotov cocktails, but something happens that it was maybe like 2 or 3 minutes that everything stopped. And a guy from the police station called us and told him, you can leave right now the building, but do it quickly. I took my car and I went out of the radio, and some guys with motorcycles began to follow me. And I told my friends who was with me into the car, we're not going to stop here, because if we stop here, they are going to burn us. So I don't know how many blocks did I drive, but I went as far as I can. Finally, they catch me, but we were so far. And in the place where they catch me, there was a lot of people, and a lot of people begins to take out his cell phones, and they began to record all what's happened with me and my friends. But it was a very terrible moment. I will show you this picture. Look at this picture. Those kids are my sons, Alvaro and Samuel. Alvaro and Samuel are my sons. What I'm showing you this because I receive a lot of message from numbers that I don't know who was it, and they always tell me, we're going to kill, we're going to hang up your kids, we're going to kill them, you're not going to see it no more. We know where your kids are a student. And my wife was getting crazy because she was so nervous. And I remember that she told me what we're going to do right now, because they are going to kill our kids. And I told her, don't worry about it. Nothing's gonna happen to them. We're going to stay here and we're going to fight till the end. And if they're coming for us, we have to be prepared for it. But let me tell you something. You know what's happened when people are trying to get into your mind with bad things, like saying, we're going to kill your sons, we're going to burn them, you're going to see them, the head of the body of them. It was so terrible. It was so dramatic. And like I told you, my wife was getting crazy. I was always with the pressure that if that's going to be the last day I'm going to see them, or maybe I can be killed by the criminals. That was the environment that was in Nicaragua in 2018. And like Stephen said, how I did to get off the radio, out of the radio, like I told you, the answer that I have is it was God to help us, to all the 22 people that we were into the radio station to go out, and nothing happens to us.
I just want to interject from the U.S.'s perspective. All independent media, with the exception of the Gray Zone, and some of the writing I was doing, and a few other people like Dan Kovalik. There's a few people that that were good, but big media, indie media such as Democracy Now! Was saying that these were peaceful student protesters. And that was the message that kept going out. These are peaceful student protesters. And, and some of us who are in it are knowing that they're not peaceful student protesters. But because Democracy Now! Is saying they're peaceful student protesters, the people on the left in the United States are going, oh, if Amy Goodman said it, it's true. And I had been going around to different colleges that I had attended and trying to talk to people and explain to them that this is a lie. And all I kept getting back was, well, Amy Goodman said. And it was extremely frustrating for some of us on the left who knew what was going on immediately. And it's why, radio stations are so critically important, because the social media is just terrible, and it is what it is. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and in relation to what you just said, Gloria, it's also worth pointing out that why did the attack happen that particular day on May the 28th? It happened because a rival right-wing radio station, or actually a television station, 100% Noticias, which is run by, or at that time was run by a criminal called, what's his name, Miguel Mora. And Miguel Mora and his team falsely claimed that they'd been attacked by a Sandinista gang, and that was just a lie. And so what they broadcast was they were urging opposition gangs to attack Nueva Radio Ya, and that was the immediate cause for the attack on Nueva Radio Ya and the attempt to burn it down and murder the 22 radio workers that were inside. Now, what happened after that, after the coup had failed in the United States, was very illuminating for me, because at that time, I don't anymore, but at that time I still had some residual faith in some level of integrity in the United States-based human rights movements. But I was shocked after all these events to learn that the Committee for the Protection of Journalists, which is a very prestigious rights organization defending freedom of expression and freedom of information in the United States, awarded a prize to Miguel Mora for defending freedom of expression in Nicaragua. And this is the guy who deliberately specifically incited violent opposition gangs to attack Nueva Radio Ya, and it's just a miracle, and God's hand, presumably, that permitted the 22 radio workers in Nueva Radio Ya to escape with their lives. And if you'd seen the footage on local TV of the attack, you'd understand that it's extraordinary that they managed to get out alive. And Max Blumenthal did a report subsequently where he visited Nueva Radio and filmed the destruction of the center. It was completely destroyed, completely burnt out. And that was posted on the Gray Zone. But as Gloria said, one of the things that I don't know what Carlos concludes about all this, but my conclusion is, and we've seen it over and over again in Ukraine, and now in Palestine, the horrific events in Palestine, one lie after another, downright lies, put out to prevent people from getting any kind of true and fair view, which should be the aim of all reporting, whether it's from media or from NGOs or from anybody else. The object of reporting is to give other people a true and fair view of what you're reporting about, which is what we try and do at Tortilla Consal. It's what Carlos and his team tries to do at Nueva Radio Ya. But that long ceased to be the ethic that drives reporting in North America and Western Europe and much of the rest of the world. And Carlos, do you have a view about that, about the ethics and the standards of reporting that you've experienced?
Of course it is. The same thing that happened years before or months before in Ukraine and happened in other countries. The same was happening in Nicaragua. And after we got burned in the La Nueva Radio Ya, human rights, they went to Nicaragua. So our boss said, guys, you almost were killed. You have to go to the office of the human rights, and you have to tell them that they have to do something for you. We, as La Nueva Radio Ya, we went to the office, and they didn't attend us. They didn't want to hear us. They say, no, okay, you can say whatever you want, that you were almost killed, but we're not going to do nothing for you. So everything that happened to us, for the human rights representative of the human rights that went to Nicaragua, we meant nothing for them. And I remember also Stephen and all the partners, the all the present, I remember that we went to the Catholic Church, and we told them, what do you think about what happened to us in La Nueva Radio Ya? And they say, yes, what happened to you, to La Nueva Radio Ya, was the answer of the suppressed by the government for the people. That's what they say, Catholic people. But when they say, when someone asks them, what do you think about the people from left wing are doing? They say they are criminals. I mean, Catholic Church was thoroughly supporting the right wings. What happened to us was the answer of the suppressed by the government, they said. But people who defend us was criminal because they are attacking the people. That was one of the most biggest lie in 2018. That was most of the people in Nicaragua are very upset by the way Catholic Church act in 2018.
Yeah, Carlos, and it's very important for people to understand that, and what they get in terms of reporting is, as often as not, especially with regard to foreign affairs, the complete opposite of the truth. And we can see that again, even now. I know the current reporting on Nicaragua continues to be that it's a brutal dictatorship where people are suffering, and it's economically in bad shape, when actually the opposite is the truth. And the Nueva Radio Ya has been one of the most important voices trying to project the tremendous achievements and advances of the Nicaraguan government, which Gloria mentioned earlier on. And people in the United States don't have access to free education. In Nicaragua, people have access to education from preschool to university. And the government recently took over 2 or 3 private universities that had been abusing their mission, and turned them into public universities to do, in my view, this is an extension of their democratization of Nicaraguan society. Before, wealthy people were able to get an edge over lower income people because they could afford to pay the fees to go to fancy universities. Well, now those fancy universities have been taken into the public university education system, and everybody is entitled to go to them. And the same is true of healthcare. Nicaragua is one of the leaders in Central America. I think it's the only Central American country that does fetal surgery. You know, and these are tremendous achievements for a small country like Nicaragua. And perhaps, Carlos, you could talk about how Nueva Radio Ya does its best to report this new reality in Nicaragua, now that it's recovered not only from the economic catastrophe of the 2018 failed coup attempt, which cost the economy, some estimate, over $1.2 billion, in an economy whose, I think its total GDP is something like 12 billion. And also it's recovered remarkably from the COVID-19, the effects of the COVID-19 episode. And can you talk about Nueva Radio Ya's coverage now?
One other point, the United States is still doing these lies. These lies didn't end in 2018. They continue. And they continue with every round of illegal unilateral economic sanctions against Nicaragua, its government, individuals within the government, its banking. I mean, the United States was Nicaragua's primary trading partner, and this is very, very difficult. So, I mean, that's another thing too, is, yeah, okay, the 2018 thing was a flopperoo, okay, but they just keep hitting Nicaragua with another round and another round and another round of sanctions. It's
Nicaragua's response to that has been to negotiate in record time free trade agreement with the People's Republic of China. Carlos, I'm really interested to get your take on how you view Nicaragua and how Nueva Radio Ya is able to report current developments.
Yes, after we were burned, there's a radio station very close to La Nueva Radio Ya, Radio Sandino. And Radio Sandino said to all the Nueva Radio Ya, you can come over here. We're going to give you a very small room, but you can reinstall all your equipment and you can go out again. So we were out maybe like 10 hours, I guess, because Radio Sandino helped us to recover, the signal, and we were broadcasting again. But something happened after 2018. All the private company in Nicaragua they were giving sponsors to La Nueva Radio Ya, they said, we're not going to support this radio because this radio is very vinculated to government. So they retire all the sponsors from La Nueva Radio Ya. In Spanish, we said, quisieron ahogarnos. They want to disappear from being a radio because, reporters, they need money to go to his home. And if you don't have no income, everything's going to be more difficult. But all the workers from the Nueva Radio Ya, they resist that thing about the most private company that they didn't want to sponsor or they didn't want to announce their products in La Nueva Radio Ya. But that thing has changed a lot in that economic situation for La Radio. Now, many companies, they recognize that they need La Nueva Radio Ya because everybody's hearing. That's the most popular radio station in Nicaragua. So they start once again putting his product to be like a sponsor for La Nueva Radio Ya. It was very difficult for us. And like Stephen said, the economy went down and we had a very difficult situation, economical situation, all of us. But government always had the answers, and they're doing a good things to recover the level of economic that Nicaragua has before. I can hear you, Stephen. I have problem. I can hear you.
Okay, sorry,
Okay,
I had myself muted, so you couldn't hear our chickens. Gloria, perhaps this is a good time to throw it open for questions. Do you agree?
Yes. Any question? No?
I have a quick question. How did the government handle all the the raiding and the burning? Was there anyone arrested for that? How did they restore order and not fall into the coup?
Yeah, this is what happened after the government stopped all the things that would happen in Nicaragua. All the criminals, the police took all the criminals and they took them to jail because they have to pay for what they did to the economy, for what they did to the family. And you know what happened? And you know what the right wings said about it? Government is doing bad things to politicals. How do they say? Political, where we say presos. I mean, people who's going to jail is because of political situation, not for criminals. That's the way they're hiding the situation of criminals, saying that they are in jail because of political situation, not for what they say. That's what, and you know something, everything is based, for the right wings, everything is based in lies. I said at the beginning that I've been working in Radio Ya and in Channel 4. I've been working for more than 20 years in a sports section because I'm a sport journalist from baseball, boxing. That's what I do. And because of the more lies about situation in Nicaragua, many sports guys left the country and they traveled to USA. In USA, they found a different story that they were told before. Come to USA, you're going to do it, everything's going to be nice. Right now, almost like 40 or 50% of the baseball players who left the country and went to USA, they are returning. Because in Nicaragua, they have baseball events all the year. They travel to another country. So they are realizing that everything was a lie, that people told them, the right wings told them. So they say it was a lie. I was a lie. I believe in lies, but now I'm coming back to Nicaragua.
Yeah, perhaps it's worth pointing out, Carlos, that about at the beginning of May, after the extremely violent events in the second 2 weeks of April, at the beginning of May, the government agreed to a national dialogue, and they withdrew all their police. All the police were withdrawn to their police stations and taken off the streets. That was a demand by the protesters, by their leaders, by the bishops, who were invited to chair the national dialogue. And the national dialogue lasted for a couple of months. But when the police were taken off the streets, that was the reason that the general population was subject to such violence. And that was why the attack was able to take place on Nueva Radio Ya, because the police were withdrawn from their barracks and only were sent out when there was a very serious event, like what happened to Nueva Radio Ya. But most of the time they were in their stations. And that's what allowed the right-wing gangs to take control of the streets. And as Gloria said, to set up these roadblocks that were called tranques, very similar to the guarimbas in Venezuela during the attempts to destabilize Venezuela by the opposition there. And so what many people view as the sequence of events was that the population became desperate as a result of what they were suffering at the hands of the right-wing gangs who are running these roadblocks, organizing murders and extortion and so forth, and also raping people, raping women and girls. And when the population realized that they desperately needed the support of the government and the police to restore order, then the government was able to say to the police, well, go back on the streets, do your job, restore order. And they had the support of the great majority of the population. I won't go into events here in Esteli, but very similar events to what took place there in Nueva Radio Ya. You probably remember, Carlos, the attack on May 30th, in which 27 people suffered gunshot wounds on a peaceful caravan of people going to Managua for a demonstration that day. But anyway, and that's all of that led to the government being in a position to have extremely strong public support to restore public order. They, as Carlos said, they detained the criminals that were responsible for the greater part of the violence. And I think it's worth making this quick point, if I can. When Paulo Brau, the head of the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights delegation in the United States, was asked by the vice foreign minister here, Valdek Jenski, well, why don't you take any notice of events in which police suffer gunshot wounds, the general population's attacked? Brau answered, well, that's not our brief. Those are criminal acts, and our brief is only to record human rights violations by the authorities. So then what Carlos said is dead right. the government then arrested people for all the criminal offences very serious criminal offences that they committed, including massacres of police officers. Completely contrary to all the lies about student massacres. But when they did that, when they arrested those responsible for those very serious crimes, a brow turned round, and the whole human rights industry turned round and said, well, why are you arresting these political prisoners? After having said that the criminal offences for which these people were responsible was none of their business. The hypocrisy is absolutely bottomless, infinite, and the lies are infinite, as Carlos has pointed out. I just wanted to make that point.
Should we go to John? There's his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So here's my question. And by the way, I don't know anything about Nicaragua, so you have to take that into account when you answer my question. What does the majority of the population in Nicaragua think should be done to render the right wing powerless?
Carlos, do you want to answer that? I can answer that quite readily, John, if that's okay. I'd say that they've already done that, because prior to 2018, they demonstrated that they were electorally unassailable. The right wing were never going to defeat the Sandinista government in free and fair elections. And so if you look at the history of the elections from 2007, you can see a steady development whereby the minority support for Daniel Ortega at the very beginning of his return to office and the return to government of the Sandinista front, he was a minority government between 2007 and 2011. He didn't have a majority in the National Assembly. After 2011, they got a majority in the National Assembly with 63% of the vote. In 2016, they got a very similar result. In 2021, they got a slightly even better result. But I think they got as much as 67% of the vote in 2021. But what that demonstrates is that there's a strong right-wing core, electoral core, of between 30 and 35%. And that's their ceiling. They're never going to breach that for the foreseeable future. And that is why the United States mounted the failed coup attempt in 2018. And it's also why the Nicaraguan authorities took what I regard as an extremely humanitarian decision to release the people that had been jailed for their crimes between 2018 and the elections in 2021, and release them to the United States. They had the choice of staying in jail and serving in some cases quite long prison sentences. They had the choice between doing that and being free in the United States, and some even went to Spain. And so what does that mean? That means that inside Nicaragua, the extremist opposition that collaborate with the United States are completely absent. They're not here anymore. So, and in answer to your question, how can the government prevent the right wing from trying to reenact what they did in 2018? I'd say that they've already done so. I don't know if Carlos agrees. Do you agree, Carlos?
Of course, Stephen. And I also want to say that 2 years ago, countries like Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, Salvador, and Panama, the most of the news that appears from those countries was the lack of security for the people. Nicaragua always is known by the most safety country of the region of Central America. And right now, we feel so proud that we still are the safety country in Central America. That's one of the things that we feel so proud. But what happened? Everything that you guys read, if you live outside of Nicaragua and you want to read about Nicaragua, most of the articles are based on lies. That Nicaragua is very dangerous, that police are doing bad things to the people. That's a lie, because everything is based online. But I have always believed that if you are basing things in life and you are saying a lot of things that are not the truth, it doesn't stay too much time. At the end of the road, everybody will say Nicaragua is a very good country.
There's two points. Somebody needs to mute. Okay. There's two things that I'd like you both to discuss. One thing that was really good that Nicaragua did when I was down there before 2018, there were a tremendous amount of NGOs who were very, very active. And they were pretending to be religious organizations, and they were pretending to be, you know, all kinds of help things. But really what they were doing was funneling money, kind of brainwashing people, and, you know, doing all kinds of really terrible things. And finally, President Ortega was able to require that these NGOs be registered and ones that are nefarious be driven out of the country. I think that was a really good move and really progressive. Another thing is in taking over some of these private universities were really a breeding ground for all kinds of criminal activities. And a lot of criminal activities came out of one particular school, and I don't recall the name of it, but I'm sure Stephen does. You know, it was a university, and they were using it for you know, weapons and all kinds of stuff. And they, you know, that was another big thing that was changed. And then there was one third thing that happened that I thought was really good. It is, you know, one of the problems that I had in understanding the Catholic Church's role, and I wrote an article on this because I was very disturbed by the Catholic Church's role. And then I started understanding that the Catholic Church is really, has two dimensions to it. It has this Opus Dei, which comes out of the Francisco Franco fascism that is in the Catholic Church. And then there's also the liberation theology, which is in the Catholic Church. So there is some really phenomenal, wonderful, you know, people in the Catholic Church. But then there's this other kind of cult within the Catholic Church that is vile. And, you know, I've seen videos of priests torturing and watching the torture of, you know, Sandinistas citizens, and it's just horrible. So I think these are three things that the country did, is to kind of get out these kind of bad actors.
Yeah, no, those are very, very good points. Can we listen to John's question, John Olson's question?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was gratified to hear that the baseball players were coming back disillusioned with what they found in the U.S. As an old baseball player, I can appreciate that. That's my comment. But my question is this. We know that Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela have all been profoundly affected by the sanctions. So my question is, to what degree is there a lot of cooperation on the economic level between those three countries? And are they able to complement each other with what they can produce? I understand that Cuba is going through some very difficult times, as is Venezuela, because of these sanctions. So that's the question. To what degree is there real active cooperation among them?
Do you want me to answer that, Carlos?
Yeah, and during the several years, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela, they have been support each other. Nicaragua is, one of the most important in economical in Nicaragua is, we say, we say in Spanish, agricultura, working with a lot of food. So Nicaragua gives foods to Cuba. Cuba prevents or gives Nicaragua, for example, some doctors and medicine and all. They have always support each other. And let me tell you something. This situation is not a good situation because of the sanction, but it makes us more strength to support all the things, the very difficult thing. I don't know if I made myself understand that, Stephen.
No, yeah, you have. And I think it's worth pointing out that ever since 2007, Nicaragua has been a member of the Bolivarian, what was then the Bolivarian Alternative, but is now the Bolivarian Alliance of the Americas, ALBA, along with Cuba and Venezuela, for a time Ecuador, for a time Honduras, but also Caribbean island nations like Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which last year held the presidency of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States. They just had a big summit in Kingstown, the capital of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And so, as Carlos pointed out, Cuba has assisted Nicaragua and Venezuela with absolutely first quality medical care. In particular, the so-called Misión Milagro, which has helped over 2 million people who had problems with their vision, with their sight, in Nicaragua and Venezuela. And Bolivia is also a member of ALBA, and that they too have benefited from Cuba's medical expertise. And Nicaragua has benefited from Cuba's educational expertise eradicating literacy, as has Venezuela and Bolivia. And of course, the criminal unilateral coercive measures against Venezuela have destroyed its economic capacity in terms of petroleum production, which is and the objective of that was precisely to prevent Venezuela from engaging in projects like Misión Milagro and like the literacy programs. That's what the United States does best. It destroys humanitarian programs and destroys populations and their economic potential. But in terms of what I think John was more interested in the economic aspect. And I think it's worth pointing out that Nicaragua is most people agree, most commentators and analysts and economists agree, Nicaragua is over 90% self-sufficient in food. And the main area that it's not self-sufficient is rice production, but they're getting close to becoming self-sufficient in rice production too. And what that means is, as Carlos has said, that Nicaragua to some extent can help Cuba with food production. It certainly helps Venezuela with food exports from Nicaragua to Venezuela. But perhaps more important than the actual amounts of stuff that get sent and exchanged between Cuba and Venezuela is the model. And the model of economic democratization of society, whereby food production is spread out among the whole rural population. That is a model that has been taken up by Venezuela to some extent, and also by Cuba to some extent, and it's a very successful model. So let's see, and let's see how that develops. But as Carlos pointed out, and one of the effects of sanctions is that it makes the target country more resilient, the target population more resilient, and we've seen that in Russia, in the case of the Russian Federation, and they were subject to really extensive sanctions. A greater number of sanctions has been applied to the Russian Federation than has been applied against Venezuela or Cuba, even Cuba. And the Russian Federation bounced back and is now, its growth is up around 8%. Its GDP, if that's worth taking into account as a useful measure, its GDP is up around 8%, 7%, something like that a year, despite the sanctions. And so one of the important things about Nicaragua's free trade arrangement, free trade agreement with the People's Republic of China is it effectively kind of provides an armor plating against any potential deepening of measures against Nicaragua by the United States. Because what's the population of the United States? 370 million? What's the population of the People's Republic of China? 1.4 billion. So, and that instead of being limited to the North American and European markets, Nicaragua can now look forward to developing its exports and its relationships, its investment relationship above all, with the People's Republic of China. So does that help you answer your question, John?
Yes, that was a comprehensive answer from both of you. Thank you very much. I'm really interested in building or having, understanding that there's really international solidarity and internationalism to be distinguished from globalism.
Right. Yeah, and it's the integration of peoples, not the integration of corporations, and that's right. The fundamental thing about the ALBA model. I mean, I'm sure you understand that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much.
Could I ask a question? Gloria? Of course. Okay. Well, hi. Yeah, I'm going to be doing an article. I've been taking notes because I'm going to do an article in the Covert Action magazine. So yeah, thanks. Very informative talks by both of you. And my question was mainly for Leon, just about the history. Because in my article, I would like to maybe just say a little more about the Radio Ya and its history. Was it part of the Sandinista revolution, or what? Could you say something about the history of the radio station?
Yes, in 1990, Sandinista government, they lost the elections to Violeta Barrios de Chamorro. So Sandinista government passed to be opposite from the new government. And that's the beginning of La Nueva Radio Ya. Sandinista said we need a radio station that always has to have the contact with people. And that's the genesis, let's say it that way, of La Nueva Radio Ya in 1990. 1990 through the day, we almost like, how much? It's like 34 years we've been having those touch with connection with people. And right now, in 1990, there was another administration from now of La Nueva Radio Ya. But right now, we are living a moment when people, if they need something, and they call La Nueva Radio Ya, and they always find in the Nueva Radio Ya most of the solution of the problem. But the La Nueva Radio Ya was burned in 1990.
Oh, it was also burned in 1990.
No, it's born. It was born in 1990.
Born. Okay, yeah, born. Yeah. Okay.
But now, before,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, before 1990, most of the people of La Nueva Radio Ya, they work for the radio of the government, that it's named Radio Nicaragua. But when Sandinista lost the elections in 1990, all those workers from Radio Nicaragua, they passed to La Nueva Radio Ya.
Okay. Thanks. And yeah, just two brief questions. One about your personal background. So you said you were a sports reporter. So how long have you worked for the radio station, and you were always working in sports?
Yeah, I began to work in sports in 1998. And I went the first time that I'm in La Nueva Radio Ya since 2001. So I had 3 years of experience when La Nueva Radio Ya, they told me come work with us. During all those that period of time, I've been covering a lot of baseball games, Major League Baseball. I was in charge. I was the press guy for the Nicaraguan baseball national team that participate in the last World Baseball Classic. I was there. I've been covering also world boxing events. For example, with Chocolatito Gonzalez right now, he's one of the most important athletes in the world. Chocolatito Gonzalez was in some period of time, he was the best boxer in the world. Number one pound for pound list was Chocolatito. So I've been involved with Chocolatito's fight and baseball events. I've been covering Pan American games. So I have a little bit of experience working in sports, but most in baseball and boxing.
Great. And what's the boxer's name? Can you spell that?
Yeah, his name is Roman. I will write it in the chat.
Great.
Yeah. Roman, his nickname is Chocolatito, and his last name is Gonzalez.
Okay.
Gonzalez. He's one of the most spectacular fighters in boxing today.
Great. I'll look him up. Okay, and my final question, but now the radio station is thriving again, right?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Great.
Well, one thing I'd like to say is everybody here who hasn't been to Nicaragua should go. And every year there's a celebration for the revolution, which is on July 19th. If I'm remembering my history, I'm a little tired tonight. And I just urge everybody to come to Nicaragua and see, what it's like to be in a country where the government cares about the people, and it's people centered, and it's one of the reasons in my mind that the United States is constantly trying to destroy Nicaragua, because when you compare Nicaragua to the United States, you look at the United States and you go, oh my God, this is terrible. And here's this developing country, the small country, about the size of New York State, that has all of these, fantastic services for people, the healthcare, the schools, and, land, titles to land. I mean, do you guys remember how many titles? I somewhere I remembered that number. We have a few other experts on this call if they want to join in. We have Barbara, we have Nan, but I mean, it's just tremendous stuff to really support the people. And, then you come to the United States and it's just terrible. And one of the things you'll notice when you go to Nicaragua is the food tastes so amazing. I mean, an apple tastes like an apple, a banana tastes like a banana. I mean, everything in the United States is picked when it's green, it's shipped, and everything tastes like cardboard. But when you go to a country like Nicaragua, every single thing is delicious. It's really, you guys got to go. You have to really see, especially John Spritzler, you really have to see what a well-run country is. And Nicaragua is not a, like socialist country. It's a mixed economy. It's got some capitalism, it's got some socialism, but the important part is the socialism is for people. In the United States, we have socialism for corporations. So that's the real rub, the real difference. So, the United States wants to silence this, and it wants to destroy this. And, my goal, has always been to really promote Nicaragua and to really, allow people to understand what a fantastic country it is, and to defend it. And, to really complain about these sanctions on this beautiful country and this kind of treatment. And to really be angry at all Western media, especially alt media like Democracy Now!, that has promoted terrible, terrible lies about such a beautiful country. So thank you. Does anyone have any other comments or questions, or want to say anything before we end the call? Jeremy, you're muted, Jeremy.
Sorry. Can you just say your age, Carlos?
Yeah, I'm 46.
46? Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm 46. I was reading about John Olson. John Olson is writing about Roberto Clemente.
Oh, yeah.
I want to tell everybody that Nicaragua is a very grateful country. So we know the story of Clemente, that he passed away, bringing food, helping to Nicaragua people who was devastated by an earthquake in 1972.
Yeah.
So in Nicaragua, we all remember Roberto Clemente all the month, all the day. We feel that we are so grateful to be connected with Puerto Rico about or through Roberto Clemente. Thank you, John Olson, for that comment.
Hi, Nan. Nan's got a question or
You're
comment.
welcome.
I had a comment.
Can we hear from Nan?
I had a comment. One, because there was a question about this. The government has provided more than 600,000 titles to families. So they didn't have to, so they're legal. That's very important. And the other thing, which maybe you've already talked about, is just encouraging everyone to call the offices of your senators and your representative, and talk to them about Nicaragua. Tell them, we shouldn't apply sanctions there. And there are a number of articles about this in Nika Notes, Nika Notes, just like it sounds. And all those articles are from just about the last 3 months, where you can get more information, or you're all smart. You just call your representatives and try to talk to whoever's in charge of, foreign policy, because it is important, despite sort of the armor or whatever the word was that Stephen used, that having the relationship with the People's Republic of China, it's still, sanctions are bad. They do have an effect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we know this Michael in the waiting room? Gloria, should we let him in? Do we know? Well, I have just a generic question, but Judith, I guess, is ahead of me.
Hi. Well, Nicaragua sounds wonderful, and I wish I could afford to go there. I missed the first 20 minutes, so I'm at a disadvantage. But one thing that I'd like to ask is Nicaragua contemplating joining BRICS? And if not, why not?
And I think the short answer to that is yes. But I suspect that they're going to wait and see how things develop with Venezuela first. And they might even decide to establish a relationship as ALBA rather than joining as individual countries. It's a possibility. I don't know. But I do know that the Russian Federation, which has the presidency of BRICS pro tempore this year, has said that they are interested in developing the integration of integrations. That is to say, building relationships between the BRICS group and other integration initiatives, like, for example, CELAC, or the African Union, or in our case, ALBA. So Nicaragua has expressed interest in the idea of joining BRICS, as has Venezuela. But let's see what happens.
Tom and John have their hands up. I think Tom and then John Olson.
Okay, is my sound working?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not. I've heard Stephen a number of times with Don DeBar. Oh, we got another person. Can someone handle the waiting room?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. John Olson again. Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying, just kind of a generic thing, like you're what the latitude that you're at, kind of tropical, we're coming into spring. Can you just kind of give us like a geographical I looked at the map and I see Managua is the major city. You got about 7 million people. I'm just probably not going to go down there, and I'm interested in kind of a generic description of, the birds and, well, I'll stop, but you know where I'm going. I'm trying to imagine what it's like to live down there. Thanks.
Well, if you want birds, just listen to the background from Stephen. He's got chickens, parrots. But
well, yeah, maybe one thing that I would like to understand the seasons, because the sun is doing interesting things, and it doesn't it pass overhead twice. Okay, I'm done.
Carlos, do you want to talk about Nicaragua's climate and the seasons?
Yeah, Nicaragua is right now it's very hot. Right now, it's a tropical country, so it's very hot. But there are, in the north of the country, the weather, it's more cold than the capital of Nicaragua, of Managua. Managua is very hot, but people who lives in the north of the continent, they always comes to Nicaragua because they like sun, they like hot weather, and they pass a good time. If you go to the beach, you're gonna have a great time. In the beach, we have lagoons, we have volcanoes. There's a city named Granada. In Granada, there's a lot of foreign people, and the food. I heard Gloria talking about the food. The food is extremely delicious here in Nicaragua. That's why we are a little bit heavy, but you're gonna have a great time passing here in Nicaragua. People are so nice. So if you need something, there's going to be a lot of people saying, don't worry, we're going to help you. It's not the country that most of the time you read when you are outside of the country. Nicaragua is a very nice country, and I feel so proud to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tom, perhaps it might help you to understand that Nicaragua is extremely diverse. Its climate is extremely diverse. The Caribbean coast has a very different climate to the Pacific coast. On the Pacific coast, there are generally two seasons, the dry season and the rainy season. The dry season usually starts at the end of November, and it lasts generally to the end of May. And then the rainy season starts usually late May or early June, and it carries on to usually to the end of November. But that's a bit different to the Caribbean coast, which has rain all year round. And so that gives you some idea of the geographical diversity. And there are 2 or 3 mountain ranges that cut across Nicaragua, and that too provokes climate diversity. So, for example, although there's a dry corridor, so-called dry corridor, the Corridor Seco, traveling up more or less from Granada up through the middle part of the Pacific coast when the farm producers have difficulty producing food in that area, Nicaragua is able to overcome that difficulty because of its diverse climate, because the diversity of the climate permits agricultural production in the rest of the country to compensate for the drought that very often affects the so-called dry corridor on the Pacific coast. And also it's worth bearing in mind that Nicaragua has two extremely important biosphere reserves, the Bossa Was Biosphere Reserve in the north of the country and the Indio Maíz Biosphere Reserve in the south of the country. And of course, following the 2012 judgment by the International Court of Justice, it also has responsibility for an important biosphere reserve, a maritime reserve off its Caribbean coast. And I don't know, is that of any help, John? Tom?
Much better picture. Just what height are the mountains, and how do they, like, linearly, do they cut diagonally across, or like where are they in the
and
state?
Carlos probably remembers his geography from school better than I do, but we call them mountains, but I don't think they reach higher than about maybe 2,000 meters above sea level.
That's right.
Am I right about that, Carlos?
That's right. Mogoton is the most highest place in Nicaragua. Mogoton, it's almost like 2,000 meters, and the most highest volcano is the one is in Chinandega, San Cristobal, more than 1,500 meters.
I think John
Thank
has
you.
his hand up. John Olson.
Okay, good. I have what's for me a really important question. Does the Nicaraguan government understand that the World Health Organization is a criminal organization trying to impose total medical dictatorship on the world, and that these mRNA vaccines are highly toxic for 1 to 2%, and they literally are lethal injections for about that percentage of people?
Yeah, I know that's the response of the Nicaraguan government to the COVID-19 event was, as Gloria said, multi-pronged. And one of the difficulties that the government had was that it depends very heavily on support from the World Health Organization for its overall vaccine program, which is completely separate to the whole issue of the mRNA vaccines that were touted as a preventive measure for COVID, but in fact brought along precisely their own set of very serious problems. And so the government is not outspoken about that particular issue, but it is resistant to attempts by Bill Gates and the other sinister figures that have taken over the World Health Organization to use the World Health Organization to impose what you rightly call this effort at global dictatorship of people's health. And I don't know if Carlos has any insights into the government position. Do you, Carlos?
Yes, everybody are saying whatever they want, but they set on lies, as I say before, about government. I work in Channel 4, and I'm a witness about how hard the government works for the Nicaraguan people. I can tell you that I work for Channel 4. Channel 4 is run by one of the sons of the president, Daniel Ortega, and they are working so hard for it. As I told you, for example, I know Stephen knows about it. There are maybe some hurricane that passed in Nicaragua. And all the government, all the people who worked for government works for help all those people who are in danger. I don't know. You can say something about it, Stephen.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's a slightly off the point for in relation to John's question, but and it's a valid point that the whole effort of the government is to care and protect the Nicaraguan population. And when they made available the different vaccines, they tended to focus on vaccines from India and the Russian Federation, and also from the People's Republic of China. They made very clear that it was voluntary, and there was no attempt to kind of force people to take the vaccine. And so, you know, a lot of people, and personally, I didn't take the vaccine. A lot of people did take the vaccine, but the main point about the government's effort, from my point of view, because I know it's an extremely controversial set of questions, but was that they insisted on the kind of cheap, very early stage preventive treatments, in particular ivermectin, for example, but also others, that prevented people from getting seriously ill in the first place. So, and although I have questions about the government's implementation of its vaccine program, you know, whether it was a wise thing to do or not, and here in Nicaragua, the effect of the pandemic was it just hasn't impacted our society here to anything like the extent that it has in the United States and Western Europe. And I look at reports from the United States in disbelief.
Some key words will get us kicked off YouTube, so let's be careful of some. I mean, words around the shots and the, you know, will get us booted, and our video won't be up.
Okay, I would like to get if Carlos
we should post to Rumble too.
Can I ask for Carlos's email? I'd like to send you some information if that's agreeable to you on this subject. Would that be suitable? If so, can you put it in the chat? Or I could relay to Gloria, whichever. I'd like to be able to get some information to you that you may not know.
Yeah, I wrote it already. Yeah, my email? There it is.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let me see.
Okay, we have
Thank you.
we have a former chair and a chair of WBAI, Michael and Carolyn. Would you like to say anything?
Well, I'm moving around at the moment, and my battery may be about to go. I'm about to sign in with another device, but I wish we could use these words and not worry about getting kicked off of YouTube. And are we posting to Rumble?
Yeah, I'll post this to Rumble too.
Okay, that's great. At least for now. We'll see what happens with Rumble in the long run. But yeah, and that's why all of this censorship is one reason that I'm trying to keep WBAI on the air, so that we're a backstop against this internet censorship, which happens so easily, so quickly, so unexpectedly, or you expect it, you just don't know when it's going to come, and they're escalating it all the time. Plus, with terrestrial radio, they don't know what you're listening to unless they're using other much more complicated means. The internet, the surveillance is intense, and they can put in it. Oh, you're listening to this. Well, then the algorithms, tell us that we need to have you get this or that pushed out as a correction. And then if they notice you don't change direction, they can think about what they want to do with you in the future. But I may lose connection
Bruce Grief is another person from WBAI. Michael, were you finished, or we just lost you for a little bit?
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
I'd like to ask Alfaro a bit of an off-topic question. I'd like to ask him what are the challenges that he faces in running a radio station. What are the difficult?
I just want to be clear. It's Carlos Alfaro Leon.
Yes, yes. You know, in
Sorry.
20, yes. Have you finished with your question?
Yeah, I'd like you to just go through like what the problems you have at the radio station in terms of radio and staff and, running a radio station, which is not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy, especially, but when the first time I went to La Nueva Radio Ya, they were already #1 radio in Nicaragua. So since the first day I stepped into the radio station, I knew that everybody in Nicaragua was going to hear me because it was the most popular radio in the country. But one of the challenges that we always have is to renovate constantly. Because if you do the same thing all the time, people may get boring. But if you renovate, the dynamics and all the things, people will always be entertainment. In 2018, when Nicaragua had that terrible moment, my job is to talk about sports. So one of the challenge was in a very difficult moment that we live in Nicaragua, talk about sports was not something that it was not let me tell you, the most important notice in the day. But we had the idea that if all the people were talking about this terrible situation that Nicaragua, the right wings are trying to kill other people, we're going to talk about sports. And you know something? There was a moment when people get bored about all that situation that we live. And people start asking us about the baseball events, Major League Baseball, and all the things. So it was a good idea at the end. I guess that was one of the most important challenge. The idea that we had, everybody is talking about bad things. We're going to talk about sports, entertainment in the radio in difficult moment. And that was at the end of the road. It was a very good idea.
Michael and Carolyn, maybe we could do some kind of, and Bruce, maybe we could do some kind of thing where we go down as a delegation from WBAI and we visit Radio Ya and we see how they do things and we bring that knowledge back, and maybe that would help us. Okay.
Can I just mention in relation to that, although I don't work for Nueva Radio Ya, I think one of the fundamental things is their incredible teamwork and their incredible love for each other. And the way that Dennis Schwartz, who's the director of the radio, is very, very reserved. And he doesn't take up the limelight, and he allows his colleagues to develop their potential and their skills. And I think, in terms of how the radio's managed, I think that relationship between Dennis and the team at Nueva Radio Ya, and this great love that they have for each other, is something that is absolutely fundamental and has enabled them to survive some very difficult periods, not just the violence of 2018, but also extremely difficult economic periods way back in the late 90s and early 2000s, under right-wing governments that denied them advertising. And now this recent period where they've also just begun to overcome the boycott that they suffered from right-wing businesses that refused to advertise with them. And as Carlos says, and they constantly renew the different things that they're developing, the different activities that they offer as a radio station. And I think that's probably the most important thing that people might learn from. And also, they're very open to learning themselves from radio stations that have also had a very difficult time, like WBAI.
Ben Bose, am I saying your name right? You have your hand up?
Yeah, it's Boshi.
Boshi.
I just wanted to kind of respond to John, who was questioning whether he should or would go to Nicaragua. I myself thinks that he should go. That I went about 3 years ago, and I had the experience of visiting Managua and Bluefield, Pearl Lagoon, and I had the opportunity to speak to the folks that was the election observer team, and many of the folks had just recently been hit by a hurricane, especially in Pearl Lagoon, where rooftops were lost, roads were lost, and they had new roads. They had new rooftops. And their position was, this is why we're voting for the Sandinistas, because look, we have this. They were comparing to Puerto Rico, who was hit by a hurricane 3 years earlier and still had no electricity. So I think it would be very beneficial if John went.
And New Orleans, which is mainland, nothing. And then you have Hawaii, Maui, which is nothing. I mean, it's and that is true. I've seen that also in Nicaragua, where the response to rebuild lives after national disasters is really phenomenal. Ed has his hand up. Ed, did you have a question?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hey, okay. So I want to ask, really for Carlos, yeah, what is look, we're here in the U.S., right? There's elections going on. It's a good opportunity to get things done. What's something that U.S. could do for Nicaragua? What can Nicaragua do for the U.S.? What can we really set up for you over here? What do you think Nicaragua needs?
I believe that what we need, Nicaragua is always telling everybody that we are that nobody from the outside has to have any opinion of what we do inside of Nicaragua. I mean, we rule our country. We believe that we are doing something good for people, and we beg for respect. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for the other country has to respect Nicaragua. And that's something that doesn't happen to many Latin American countries. If you are opposing the monster of the monster of the continent, all the people begins to say that country doesn't work, that government doesn't work, and that's false. In Nicaragua, we have a good way of ruling the country, so we're looking for respect. That's the only way. That's the only thing we are asking. We're asking for respect, all the Nicaraguan people, the Nicaragua government.
And I think Ed, the best way, am I muted? Let's see. I think the best way we could do it is just bringing attention to Nicaragua and to just getting the message out, because we can't trust Democracy Now! And shows like that to do it. We need to get the message out ourselves, because they're not providing the truth. They're providing State Department talking points. Judy has her hand up, and then I think that's it for tonight. We're a little after 10, and it's been wonderful. Judy?
Yeah. All right. Okay, so you have a mixed economy. Now, frequently, or most of the time, what's good for business is not good for the ordinary people, the non-rich people. So you have capitalist businesses. I assume they are, unless they're just small mom and pop stores or something that are advertising on your station. And so I would imagine that they want to influence people to be for whatever it is that they think is good for themselves, and which is probably opposed to what the government is doing and what the ordinary listener wants. So do they attempt to influence programming? And if so, how do you counteract that? Okay.
Okay, there's another one. Question, no.
Yeah, that was the question.
Okay, after 2018, there was a lot of people in Nicaragua who they were fired by the company that they work, so they didn't have no job because the situation was so difficult economically, because you know the strikes, the situation of 2018, that situation made very weak situation for the economy. Government began to promote to the people in Spanish we say emprender. I was looking in the dictionary, it says undertake. So if the less amount of money that I have, I put a very small, for example, a very small business, and most of the people who didn't have job after the 2018, they are doing good. And it's like a very, very good example of people when they want to do something for life. I know that maybe it was not the right way to do it, but in Nicaragua, there is something in Nicaragua that I like the most. That thing could be very difficult, but Nicaragua people never stop laughing. They always find a way to have a good time. So 2018 was a very terrible year, the worst year in my 46 years of life, but we never stopped laughing, and we were working hard to get out of that terrible situation. And 6 years later, about that terrible situation, I'm telling you that in Nicaragua we feel and we know that we are going forward to a better years that we are hoping to have in the future.
Okay, well, my question basically was, you have sponsors, and do they attempt to influence the program in ways that would benefit themselves and not the general population, and possibly might be against government policy? And do they do that? And if so, how do you counteract that?
Yes, I had an experience with it. In 2018, I had a sponsor in 2018, very good sponsor in the radio station. In 2018, my sponsor was a little bit of right wing. So he told me, Carlos, we want to keep working with you, but there's a problem. The problem is that you are working with La Nueva Radio Ya, and I don't like that place, you know, because all the situation. So the only way I can continue with you is that you move, that if you move from that radio to another radio, go to another radio, and I will keep working with you. I remember that I told that guy, I'm very grateful with you, with your support, but you know I'm not going to leave right now La Nueva Radio Ya. I will stay here because I have 18 years working for La Nueva Radio Ya, and this situation is not going to make me to move to another place. So the guy told me, okay, this is the end. This is the end of the relation. That was in 2018. 2 years ago, the same guy called me and they told me, Carlos, we want to work with you again. So that's what happened with most of the sponsors. They left in 2018. They are returning to work with us.
Can I just add, Judith, that might be helpful for you to understand the composition of Nicaragua's economy. Around 70% of the people employed in Nicaragua's economy work in the family economy, the small business, very micro business sector. And so the big business like the Carlos Pelas and similar individuals, extremely wealthy individuals with big companies, and their contribution to the national economy is probably something around 20% in terms of employment. And the public sector is probably responsible for about 10, maybe a little bit more % of the country's employment. Just so you have an idea of the structure of Nicaragua's economy and why you'll often hear people like me talking about the importance of the economic democratization of Nicaragua's economy and society.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering about that, and I was wondering about the social class in Nicaragua. If you could elaborate on that, I would appreciate it.
And do we have time?
I think we're getting a little late. It's now 10:19. Judy, I think you know we'll establish some other things. There's some notes in the chat. There's a
Michael
few things
has a question.
you could go into Nika Notes, which is really a very good source of information. And there are places I could kind of hook you up with where you could go into some deep dives. Michael has a question. Did you say?
Right.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, I see Michael's hand up. Okay, let's give Michael the last word. This is WWII's chairman, and we have Carolyn here too, who's a former chairman and chairperson. And
I'm just picking up on some of the things that were just said, and since it's at the end, maybe this is much too big to raise right at the end. But I think the answer was hinted at. With a mixed economy, it's perhaps arguable that in some respects there's more capitalism in Nicaragua than in the United States, where we have very little capitalism in any true sense. We have, you know, we now just have these giant corporations, oligarchies, or monopolies, and that not capitalism. You don't have. Supply and demand no longer operate. Yeah, it does. Classically, it does make sense when you have what's referred to as a natural monopoly, such as the United States Constitution refers to there being a post office because that's a national monopoly. We now have Amazon emerging, fulfilling similar functions, and is maybe a natural monopoly, but it's not being run by the government. Normally, if you have a natural monopoly, it's supposed to be run by the government. But what we have is these huge monopolies, oligopolies that laminate themselves to the government, and I think people are aware that that's classically defined as fascism. A lot of people say fascism means totalitarianism, but that's the more classical definition of fascism. So it's quite possible with a mixed economy, and a lot of mom and pop that we are driving out of business in the United States. That Nicaragua is ahead of us in having a real functioning capitalist sector of their economy.
Okay. Do you want to respond to that, or okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly. Carlos might want to respond, but just quickly, I'd argue that the government's model is one of its National Human Development Plan is focused on reducing poverty, and so one of their ways of doing that is by democratizing the economy, by making it possible for the majority of the population to participate particularly in agricultural and related production. But also, as Carlos has pointed out, over the last 5-6 years, the government has put a lot of work into promoting small businesses. And so, I regard Nicaragua as a country that is using socialist principles, but allowing capitalist activity to function as long as it's producing wealth that can then be redistributed, rather than, as Michael was just talking about, allowing monopolies to take over.
And
I don't know what Carlos reckons on that.
And wealth to be extracted and concentrated. So yeah. Carlos, did you want to have some last words, or should I close the meeting? You're muted.
I wanna say thanks to all of you, and I try to do my best. I'm learning the language, so I hope you understand everything I said. I'm sorry if I didn't answer the way you want me to do it, but I had a great time. And in fact, let me tell you, even when I was talking about Nicaragua, I also learned about you. And I feel so happy to be here, to be invited by Glory. Thank you, Glory.
Well, I'd like to thank Carlos, Alfaro Leon, and Stephen Sefton, and La Nueva Radio Ya, and Tortilla for joining us tonight, and showing us another glimpse of what's really going on in the world, and I hope that we can take this message and spread it widely, and we'll do our best. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for attending, and I love everyone.